צהריים טובים.
Good
יש לי
afternoon.
הכבוד להזמין את כבוד שר הביטחון, מר אביגדור ליברמן. שר הביטחון מגיע מסיור ברצועת עזה, ולכן הוא לא יהיה חמוש בחליפה ועניבה, אבל אנחנו מקבלים אותו פה בשמחה רבה, ואני אדבר איתו על בעיות הביטחון של מדינת ישראל. כבוד שר הביטחון, בבקשה. כבוד שר הביטחון, זה כבר נהיה אצלנו מנהג לראיין אותך בכנסים שלנו. אנחנו הגשנו בראשון בינואר את הערכה האסטרטגית שלנו לנשיא המדינה וגם האנשים שמובילים את המדינה. ואחד הדברים שהצבענו עליו שהוא שונה משנים קודמות זה אותה נחישות שאנחנו רואים בצפון. מצד אחד נחישות Iranian determination
to establish itself military, Hezbollah, number 2 in Syria, Shiite militias, and on the other hand, we are seeing very strong determination on the part of Israel's political and security establishment and leadership to not allow it to happen. Where is that leading us? To escalation?
First of all, again, I apologize. I came directly from Kfar Gaza. I'm without a suit, without a tie, but I admit that it's great to start the morning in the Gaza Strip and the kibbutz and to see the people still, they're full of spirit and feeling of mission. So really, it's a pleasure. As for what's happening in the north, first of all, we have to understand that it's true that you're talking about the Iranian ambitions, but it's not just in the context of Syria or Lebanon. These are ambitions at the moment that are deployed over the entire Middle East. You see the same patterns of behavior in Iraq, the same Shiite militias that they established in Iraq, and obviously they equip them with those missiles and that know-how and consultants. You see the same thing in Yemen. And behind all that, there is one man. And I think that in Syria, we see that they also understand that the state of Israel is also very determined. And had I compared it to all the other places, it's the least Iranian presence that we see in the Middle East is in Syria. But what's happening in Lebanon, it's much more simple. Actually, Hezbollah sacrificed the national interests of Lebanon on the altar of the Iranian ambitions. It just actually works in contrast to the national Lebanese interest. I think it's obvious today to a large part of the population of Lebanon, although Lebanon is Lebanon. First of all, they take care of their business, and then each of them shares the area. They're Sunnis, so they work with the French, and you've got Christians. They are connected to the United States, and there everybody sort of does something else. But at the end of the day, it's obvious to everybody that Hezbollah acts in contrast to the national Lebanese interest, and it sacrifices the entire country. And it's obvious that if, God forbid, there'll be war in the north. It's not going to be like last time. It's not going to be vis-a-vis Hezbollah. Entire Lebanon, as far as I'm concerned, it's the military Lebanon, the army. They're not different to Hezbollah. They're part of it, and everybody's going to pay the full price. So before we go to a breakout of a war, let's say how we prevent it. Let's see, as you said, in Syria, the Iranians understood that we are can apparently doing something, whereas in Lebanon we did not do anything, and now the spokesman of the ADF said that the Hezbollah is building with the help of the Iranians, a plant for accurate missiles in Lebanon. And as we said, Israel is not going to let it happen. So how do you, on the one hand, prevent this thing, and on the other, make sure that we do not slide into war? 3 points. You can stop a war, first of all, by the determination, and they understand that on the other side there is an army and a leadership which is very determined. Determined is also power. They understand that today we have power like we didn't have before. And the third thing, we exert all the international community. So that creates possibility to prevent things, but not to decline and go down to war. I think this approach of us is very obvious. It's obvious in Washington, in Moscow, in Paris, everywhere. Our position is that we are determined. We are also ready. And also we explain, and unfortunately sometimes in the international arena people are not confused by facts, they just ignore facts. But basically we have to understand that the state of Israel after July 2000, if you remember July 2000, there was an announcement by Kofi Annan, the Secretary General of the UN, that Israel fulfilled the resolution 425, and we went, there were no complaints, but 3 days later the Security Council also approved the announcement of Kofi Annan. So as far as we're concerned, we really went back to the international border, which is accepted. There's an approval, and all the provocations that Hezbollah is trying today to incite and to try to, like all of a sudden you hear that they're precious. How come we are building a fence in our sovereign area, or they issue a tender on the gas, Block 9, which is ours. There's no question about it. So even this Block 9, they issue a tender to an international group with very distinguished companies, and I think they're making a grave mistake because it's against all the rules and all the possibilities in these cases. And it's not the first case of the controversy in the international arena about the fuel, about the gas or the oil, and they're provocative. But nevertheless, we try to act determinedly and also with responsibility. That's very encouraging to hear that the political issues, first of all, the initial policy that Israel takes to get legitimacy, to explain. I saw that the head of intelligence went with the Prime Minister. I'm sure they presented the facts, but let's assume that it's not going to help. And in fact, the escalation is going to happen. You spoke about Hezbollah equals Lebanon. The fact that we're not going to distinguish between Hezbollah and Lebanon, but we're saying with our strategic evaluation that maybe this privilege that we have war in one front like we had in 2006, or in the 3 conflicts in Gaza, that may be something that's not going to happen next time. Maybe we'll have a front that has both Lebanon and Syria and the Shiite militias, and we call it the first Shiite war, not the third Lebanon war, because as a politician, how are you going to, as a minister, navigate the army in order to prevail in this conflict in a way that will strengthen the security of Israel, both militarily and also deterrence for long term? Look, when we talk about the northern front, we don't talk about Lebanon. And I correct myself, we're talking about the northern front. Syria is built in. And I hope that Syrians will have enough sense not to go in to such a war, and I'm not sure they'll have a capability to say no to the Hezbollah. And therefore, our basic assumption is that, of course, we talk about the northern front. And there are all sorts of complex elements how to act, but this is definitely our assumption. This is the way we are building ourselves, all the plans, all the programs, that it's not Hezbollah, but Lebanon and Syria as one northern front. And I think that we have good answers for that. In the past, the political leadership and also the military senior leadership hesitated to have boots on the ground. There was a feeling that we want to prevail through the good intelligence, the good air force that we have, and only to prevail from the air. How do you direct the army today for the maneuvers? What kind of maneuvers or drills you do? What depth can you tell us? First of all, you have to understand, drill is not a goal by itself. Maneuvers are, the idea is to end. If, God forbid, again, I underscore, nobody is looking for adventures, and I think it's bad for the entire area if eruption happens in the north or flare-up. But if this will happen, you have to understand that the idea is, first of all, to end it as fast as possible in a very unequivocal way. Must be a victory, a decisive victory. What we saw in all the conflicts in the Middle East in the last few years, unfortunately, without boots on the ground, it does not end. This whole issue of land warfare is very complex. It compels to have a off effort and, of course, unfortunately, victims as well. And in the terms of the State of Israel, such a land drill and maneuver is not a simple decision. And as always, all the options are open. I am not sitting on one perception. You have to be ready in all fronts. I'm not sure we have to use it. But if there's no choice, we'll use it. If there is a choice, I think it's better not to have boots on the ground. But I think that this option of land warfare, we have to be ready for it 100%. The Israeli home front, or the civil front as we call it in INSS, it's going to suffer. I have no doubt who is going to prevail in the next northern war. Had it been in terms of basketball, then the result would be 99-19. But this 19 of theirs will be presented as a huge victory. And our 99, we're going to have an investigation committee. And Vinograd, the justice, already died, but they'll find someone else. How do you cope with this asymmetry and the expectations of the Israeli public that expects from the IDF to prevail a real quick victory, 6 days, not more than that, that the enemy will brandish a white flag? How do you cope with these expectations? Look, first of all, these are expectations that don't exist since the Iraq. They're not realistic, you mean? No, I mean don't exist, because everybody understands since the Iraq war up to Protective Edge, including the second Lebanon war, everybody understands that as far as the enemy is concerned, the main target is the civilian home front. They don't want to confront with the IDF, but they try to hit the civilian home front. That's why we understand that. But what's important is, first of all, how the public is going to behave and how the media. You know, I had a meeting here with one of the most important people in the Israeli media, and that was exactly the conversation. And he said, you have to understand, if there are 100 buildings that were demolished in the center of Beirut, and one building in Tel Aviv. First of all, I'm going to report the one building in Tel Aviv and not the 100 buildings in Beirut. So first of all, we have to understand that there's no question that the media is interested, first of all, on the things that happen in Israel. And we have to understand that the media, there's no monitoring, there's no responsibility, and people are going to be in the shelters. Each of them will be with an iPhone and will jump from one site on the web to another, and anybody who has a TV is going to zap and see in all the Israeli and international channel, they'll see the pictures, and that's why we do say to the public, look, listen, we are acting 24/7, you don't have to get excited, you have to take into account that we're all understand that the civilian home front, this is the great challenge, and we're going to do everything possible in order to hit with the highest strength. They're no longer war like a Yemenite dance, one step ahead, two steps back. From the first hour, you have to go with the highest bar, highest profile in order to end it as fast as possible. And we cannot afford pictures like we had in the Second Lebanon War, that the citizens of Tel Aviv went to the beach and the people in Tel Aviv sat in shelters. This is not going to happen. If people in Tel Aviv are going to sit in shelters, entire Beirut is going to sit in shelters. It's not going to be anything different. You have to understand that. The other side has to understand that as well. Let's go over to the deal with Iran. The Prime Minister says it should be annulled, or if not that, then at least it should be fixed. President Trump says exactly the same. We don't see the PM cannot annul the deal, is not part of it. And Trump talks about the possibility that the United States will walk out of the deal, but for the time being, he passed it to the Congress. Now he's talking to the Europeans. What do you think about it? Cancelling the deal is something that's going to contribute to the security of Israel, or are there risks involved too? First of all, this is a bad deal, a very bad deal, and we saw where it's leading to. You don't have to guess. You have facts. I never suggest to invent facts, but to look at them as is. And we saw where this deal took us regarding North Korea. Even with North Korea, superpowers sat, led by United States, and they signed, and we know how it ended. The deal with Iran has more holes than the other agreement at the time with North Korea. And the deal with Iran is worse because it gave legitimacy complete. They don't have to dismantle all the new centrifuges. They maintained thousands of centrifuges from the new generation. They can deal with research. Nobody limits them in their military plan. So it's true that at the moment this whole enrichment of uranium is put aside, but at the moment they advance in the other things. They develop their missiles and the military plan, everything, and therefore the deal is definitely not just bad, it also puts the entire Middle East into a weapon race, and we shouldn't delude ourselves. The Middle East at the moment is in the beginning of the nuclear arms race. When I look at countries around here, and everybody is looking what happened with North Korea, and everybody makes the calculation, and the fact that the North Koreans now created for themselves some sort of immunity, so everybody comes unfortunately to a bad result, a bad conclusion. And if you want to fix this situation, then the deal with Iran has to be on the table. No question that we support all these attempts of the United States to change it. I think that also in Europe they internalize the fact that if Iranians will have missiles of 1,600 kilometers, they'll have also for 2,200, and missiles for 2,200 kilometers already cover all Europe. all the EU. And that's why I think that at least it's for the first time that we feel that there's some sort of understanding to our anxieties. And if I have to identify something, I think the Europeans are ready now to open this issue of the ballistic missiles and to demand some supervision on the military plan. But on the other hand, you see all the Europeans running huge companies like Total in France. They run into Iran, they invest money, projects, billions of dollars. I said once, I think to you, it reminds me of the presumption of Lenin at the time. At the time he said, he had a statement, we are going to hang the bourgeoisie on the same rope that they will sell us in order to make 2 pennies. So I think this is also the logic of many big companies in Western Europe are running like crazy into Iran and try to make 2 pennies, but to take the risk of the implications. So let's assume that this is really the European position, that they don't allow President Trump enough rope to stay, to do something with the deal. So let's say he withdraws, he walks out. The Iranians, as a reaction, will stop, there will be no impact, and they'll redevelop all the enrichment. Then what? What does states do and what does Israel do? I'm not authorized to speak on behalf of the United States, but I think that the Americans understand that this is a threat no longer just on Israel. This is a threat on the entire world order. We're talking about American interests and Gulf countries and Saudi Arabia and the entire world. It's enough already, you know, that we have all sorts of hesitations regarding North Korea. Everybody's looking at North Korea and everybody understands that this is a real problem. Just last night, President Trump, in his union speech, related to that, but nobody found the solution. Nobody wants to create a new problem, and that's why I think the Iranian issue cannot be an Israeli issue. We have to keep all the time approaching the international community to talk to them and to pinpoint the very severe implications. And look, now you don't have to convince anybody. It's not just us alone. You don't have to convince the Gulf countries that Iran is an immediate, tangible threat. You don't have to convince the Saudis and many other countries in the Middle East. Today, we are not alone. And this cannot continue to be our problem. It's a problem of the international community, and it has to solve the problem. But if we go along with you, that the Americans are busy with North Korea, that as opposed to Iran, that still doesn't have missiles that get to New York and to Chicago, and doesn't have nuclear warheads, I guess that President Trump is dealing with North Korea. The Europeans, you analyzed well, they're not going to do anything, and we're going to remain with the Gulf countries and Saudi, and the Iranians are galloping towards a bomb. Then what? I think that, as I said, at the moment, this subject in Europe as well as in the United States, they take it very seriously. I think the others too. I don't think that China or Russia are very enthusiastic with the idea that Iran is going to turn into a nuclear superpower. And therefore, the consensus here that if they actually break through all the conventions and start manufacturing and enriching on a very high level, in my opinion, the reality is going to be completely different. Again, first of all, we have to understand that at the end of the day, we must rely only on ourselves, but on the other hand, not to take exclusivity of the problems of the world. And Iran, I reiterate, it's not an Israeli problem, it's the problem of the international community.
Okay.
Let's go 2,000 kilometers to the closer range to our relations with the Palestinians.
In the past year, we have been waiting for Trump's ultimate deal, which, unlike all the other subjects that he said that he would behave differently and also spoke differently from President Obama, here the ultimate deal reminded me of Kerry's efforts in 2014 to reach a final status agreement. A year has gone by. There is no ultimate deal in sight. We all saw what he did in Jerusalem. How, in your estimate, will the process between Israel and the Palestinians develop in the coming year? What will the Americans do? Will Abu Mazen succeed in bringing in another mediator that is not the U.S.? He wants P5+1 that dealt with Iran, that they should deal with this conflict. How do you see the coming year in terms of our relationship with the Palestinians? First of all, you need to understand the fundamental thing. Abu Mazen is not interested in reaching an agreement with Israel. He doesn't want any agreement. Doesn't matter who the mediator is. He wants to drag his feet and wear us down. So I suggest, let's talk about facts. So we are saying Trump is the bad guy. Avigdor Liberman is the bad guy. Netanyahu is the bad guy. But let's go back to President Bush. There was the ultimate meeting in Annapolis. I'm sure you remember it well. Udi remembers it, of course, from previous positions. There was that summit in Annapolis. Condi Rice was there, and Ehud Olmert, and Tzipi Livni, and Abu Mazen. And I once again say there will not be a single prime minister in the future who will agree to go as far as Olmert agreed in Annapolis on the subject of the right of return, refugees, the partition of Jerusalem, exchange of territories. When you look, those who are familiar with the Annapolis document, when I saw it for the first time, I was in shock. Once again, everything was ready for a huge ceremony on the White House lawn, and Abu Mazen said no. And then 8 years, we had President Bush, and then 8 years of President Obama with Kerry and with Hillary Clinton, and with all those efforts of 8 years, he managed to drag his feet all that time and refused to sit down with us, and he had another excuse, the settlements. And now he has found yet another excuse, Jerusalem. And it doesn't matter who the mediator is and what is offered. He'll always have an excuse why not. As far as he's concerned, his age, his legacy, and again, he has become, people say he's such a nice guy and such a civilized guy and so accepted. People forget that he's from the old school of the founders of the Fatah and PLO, who was educated in Moscow and was brainwashed at that time. There was an institute named after Patrice Lumumba, and his doctorate was on Holocaust denial. And then he wrote a book that was published in Jordan. I have the book in my office, that book in which he denies the Holocaust. Everybody forgets that. Abu Mazen, unlike others, understands that in a direct confrontation between us and them, a violent military confrontation, they have no chances. And his strategy is not to confront us, but rather to be nice to everyone and to wear us down with a long, never-ending procedure. He has no desire whatsoever to reach any agreement with Israel, no matter what the proposal is. Is there anyone else among the Palestinians who could come instead and who might be more willing to reach an agreement? I said we've never been good in in deciding who should be king. That's not our role. We are looking for a fair and just settlement, but that's their job to decide who their leadership is and reach an agreement or not reach an agreement. For the time being, what we need to do is to manage the conflict and do the maximum we can, and the maximum we can do is to reach a long-term interim agreement. I've said it to all the current envoys, and you remember, of course, Clinton and Kerry. Remember the first time we spoke, there was a special envoy, Senator Mitchell, if you remember. And I remember the first time we met, I said, forget the words final status agreement, it's not going to happen. And he was a bit skeptical, and I said, listen, it won't happen, don't think about it, that's overambitious, there's no partner on the other side. What's also important to understand is how legitimate, to what extent his regime is legitimate at all. I'd like to remind you that the Palestinian Constitution, the elections for the president and parliament were supposed to be held in January 2010. We, thank God, are already in January 2018, so he's only 8 years overdue for his presidential election. So what about his control over Gaza? Who does he exactly represent there? Okay, Defense Minister, you've convinced us that it won't work with Abu Mazen. Okay, we've won the blame game. It's his fault. But you talked about a just and fair peace. So let's say we've won the blame game, and now the initiative is in your hands, and you are setting a goal for the next 3 to 5 years. What settlement do you see that is fair and just? You know, you can't artificially create a fair and just and smart agreement. If you ask me, what is the central thing that prevents us from reaching an agreement with the Palestinians? And again, the central basic thing that is preventing a settlement or an agreement is the same reason why we saw the Arab Spring. What is the Arab Spring? What was the reason for it? The reason was the middle class. There's no middle class in Arab society. For a policy of peace, for a desire for coexistence and stability. You look at all the successful countries in the world, Norway, Switzerland, 95% of the population is middle class, a strong and stable middle class. That's one thing. My problem is that the gap in the per capita GDP between us and the Palestinians is too high. We are approaching $44,000 per capita GDP, and there it's less than 3,000. So anyone who thinks that the conflict is over the territory or over, I don't know what, the economy or whatever, no. As long as that's the gap, you can't bridge it. And that's why I maintain that economic stability in Judea and Samaria is an Israeli security interest. Anyone who prevents accelerated economic development, the one preventing accelerated economic development in Judea and Samaria is Abu Mazen himself. I've spoken to hundreds of Palestinian business people, and that's a consensus among them. If you are not among the 4 or 5 close associates or members of his family, you don't have a chance. He's strangling and choking the Palestinian economy. Excuse me. Please allow me to finish. Please allow me to finish. Please allow me to finish. What Israel would you like to see? Forget Abu Mazen. What Israel would you like to see? Let's say you have the strength to shape Israel, its image, its demographic nature, its borders, its security, which we can't ignore, its moral nature. What kind of Israel do you want to see? I would like, nevertheless, to go back to what I was saying. Anyone who thinks that our conflict is with the Palestinians is wrong. We have no conflict conflict with the Palestinians. Our conflict is with the Arab world, and it is a three-dimensional conflict. It is with the Arab states, with the Palestinians, and with the Israeli Arabs. And I believe that we need to reach a settlement that is a package deal that includes a settlement with Arab states, with Israeli Arabs, and with the Palestinians. Any attempt to reach a bilateral agreement with the Palestinians is doomed to failure in advance. If we must reach a situation where, first of all, the Arab states that will stop being the concubine of the Middle East. I want to see an Israeli embassy in every moderate Arab state. I want to see open skies from Tel Aviv to all Arab states, all Arab capitals. I think that they will benefit even more than that from us. This combination of our initiative, of our high tech, and their financial strength will change the entire Middle East. And if that is not an element in the settlement, that's unfortunate, because that must be a basic element in the agreement. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm the one who is asking the questions, says the moderator. After that, anyone who wants to be an Israeli citizen must show his loyalty to the state of Israel, to its flag, an anthem, that he's willing to serve in the military. I see no reason why a young Arab can't be a brigade commander in the paratroopers. What we're seeing on Israeli television, an Israeli Knesset member who stands up and says, as far as I'm concerned, the Israeli flag is a rag, and I prefer to die rather than sing the Israeli national anthem, and continues to vilify the state of Israel. And he is a member of Knesset who was already accused of security offenses in the 1970s and continues to serve in the Knesset. Or another Knesset member from the podium in the Knesset says, any Palestinian who sells land to Jews is a traitor who should be sentenced to death. Imagine if someone from my party had said anyone who sells land to Arabs had said something different. Imagine the uproar here in Israel. We see thousands who go out to attend the funerals of those three murderers from al-Faham who were killed on Temple Mount. 3 Druze policemen. When you see the inflamed atmosphere, or when you see Ayman Uda, who refuses to come to Shimon Peres's funeral and calls him the murderer from Kfar Kana, and visits those who go to the grave of Arafat in Ramallah, if they think that that can continue, is wrong. That must be a basic, fundamental element of any settlement. Let's go back to the area of your responsibility, a very important area. We have seen recently that there is a dilemma who ultimately gives the IDF its orders, the commanders or the rabbis. There's no dilemma there. There's no dilemma. I would like to hear your opinion. Look, you don't even need to ask me, I think. That's, you know, you're throwing me a softball. There's no dilemma there. The reality is, anyone who thinks that it's not the commander who gives the order has no place in the army. The rabbis who are trying to undermine that reality, they will not be allowed to step foot in the IDF. That is impossible. You know, today it's one rabbi, and there's another, today it's one defense minister or another, but these are basics that could undermine the very foundations of the building we all live in. That is to undermine the very foundations of the state of Israel. The IDF that's the only army we have. It is a people's army in every sense in the world, and there's no compromise allowed. We must not remain silent in the face of such things, and in the clearest manner of fashion, this must be prevented from day one. Mr. Defense Minister, you have been a defense minister for almost 2 years. Could you share a personal moment? When was the moment when you needed to make a very difficult decision, and a moment when you perhaps shed a tear, something that moved you as defense minister? It's very difficult to speak about tears. I'm not the crying type. That's not me, I have to admit. But I was very moved, I must say, for just a moment, albeit, but that was in the first few minutes when I entered the Ministry of Defense and there was a ceremony and you become the defense minister, you know, that's the fulfillment. I consider that a fulfillment of the Zionist dream, a new immigrant with a heavy Russian accent who came to Israel with nothing, without a penny, and started the whole journey from the bottom rung. And I have to say there aren't too many countries in the world where those possibilities are given. We like to complain and whine and say things are bad, but ultimately I don't know a single other country where you could climb that whole path where everything is open to everyone, and it was very, very moving. Regarding difficult decisions, who knows better than you that when you're sitting in the chair of the defense minister, you have to make difficult decisions almost every day, certainly in such a difficult period when you have to make decisions all the time, and I've already said that the words life and death, that's not a metaphor, that's a daily reality that you have to deal with. And indeed, you have to be extremely responsible in making every decision and to study every decision carefully, because the implication can be very far-reaching. Moses brought us here, he didn't bring us to Scandinavia or the border between Switzerland and Italy, and here the defense minister will have to make difficult decisions almost daily for many years to come. Our time is up. Thank you very much. I would like to conclude. We said that we do not choose who will replace Abu Mazen, but you will be you have the power to appoint the next chief of staff. Our excellent chief of staff is now entering his 4th year. When will you decide who the next chief of staff will be? And can you tell us who it will be? Of course, in the next minute I'll tell you. But as has always been the case, you need 5 or 6 months before the chief of staff ends his term. You need to decide. So I think that around Rosh Hashanah in September, October, we'll decide. Ultimately, it's the cabinet that has to decide. It is an appointment that requires the approval of the cabinet. I don't recall any cases when there wasn't approval. There have been difficulties in appointing chief of staff. We don't have to remember it wasn't that long ago. So we want it to go smoothly. There are a number of excellent candidates. And it's always good when there are a number of candidates. I don't remember when there was just a single candidate, but indeed here too, it's not an easy decision, and it's good that we have a number of excellent candidates. Thank you very much.